In this video we'll talk about the Karabakh War, its historical backdrop and the reasons behind its eruption. We will also explore this conflict from two different perspectives, the Armenian perspective and the Azerbaijani perspective. Background to the conflict, Armenian view. The roots of the Karabakh conflict reach far back in time, well before the full-scale armed clashes of the 1990s. The struggle for Karabakh commenced during the Russian Revolution, when the Caucasus region declared its independence. However, this newly formed Transcaucasian republic swiftly fractured into three separate states. The Azerbaijani Republic boldly asserted its claim over the Nagorno-Karabakh region, which has been predominantly inhabited by Armenians for countless generations. As a result, Karabakh's Armenians staunchly resisted Azerbaijani control, forming self-defense units. In response, the Azerbaijani military carried out harsh actions against Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh and beyond. Foreign powers such as Turkey and England eventually intervened in the conflict, generally supporting Azerbaijan and frequently intervening on its side. The final destiny of Karabakh was ultimately decided by Soviet authorities, who asserted control over the entire Caucasus region during the 1920s. Despite Azerbaijan's efforts to assert its interests, Karabakh was ultimately designated as part of Azerbaijan and remained so until the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Azerbaijani perspective. The lands of Nagorno-Karabakh were artificially severed from the broader Karabakh region during both the Russian Empire and later the Soviet Union. The Karabakh Khanate was incorporated into the Russian Empire as early as 1822, when the region was predominantly Muslim. However, due to the anti-Islamic policies of the Russian Empire, many Muslims began to leave the region, relocating to neighboring Muslim nations such as Persia. Simultaneously, the resettlement of Armenians in these lands were actively encouraged. The outcome of these policies was a growing Armenian presence on Azerbaijani territory. As instability within the Russian Empire escalated, Nagorno-Karabakh experienced violent incidents against its Muslim minority by Armenians. In response, the Azerbaijani Republic dispatched its own military forces to quell the Armenian population in Nagorno-Karabakh, thus igniting the conflict. Turkey and later Britain also became embroiled in the conflict, but their involvement had limited impact. The definitive status of Nagorno-Karabakh was a result with the advent of Soviet rule. While the resolution favored Azerbaijan, Nagorno-Karabakh was granted significant autonomy within the country. War beginnings, Armenian perspective. As the year of perestroika began, history seemed to repeat itself. The Armenian majority in Karabakh once again started to assert their rights to independence and sent appeals to the Supreme Soviet of the Soviet Union. Concurrently, Azerbaijani nationalism began to rise, and with a renewed focus on Karabakh, pogroms against Armenians on Azerbaijani territory commenced. In 1990, a major pogrom of Armenians occurred in Baku, resulting in the loss of about 90 lives. The Soviet authorities once again sided with Azerbaijan, as they did in the 1920s. This led to the deployment of security forces to suppress Armenian uprisings in Karabakh, further compelling the Karabakh Armenians to fight for their independence. As a precursor to the Soviet Union's dissolution, a referendum was held in Karabakh, where 99% of the population voted in favor of establishing the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. However, Azerbaijani authorities ignored the will of the people, and troops were sent into Karabakh, eventually erupting into a bloody conflict between Armenians and Azerbaijanis. The war beginnings, Azerbaijani perspective. With the onset of perestroika in the Soviet Union, nationalist sentiments surged throughout the country, except in Armenia, which encouraged Karabakh Armenians to rise up in the region. Pogroms targeting Azerbaijanis living in Armenia and Karabakh commenced. Moreover, Armenian separatists began launching attacks on the surrounding territories of Karabakh, forcing the Azerbaijani residents to flee. Regarding the referendum, it was conducted with multiple violations and received no recognition from any world nation. These events led to the Soviet army, followed by the Azerbaijani army taking action to restore order in the region. Participants in the conflict, Armenian perspective. Officially, Armenia did not engage in the conflict, but provided Karabakh Armenians with food and ammunition. The Karabakh Armenians defended their independence against Azerbaijani occupiers. It's worth noting that Azerbaijan employed numerous mercenaries during the war, including Islamist radicals from Afghanistan and Russia, such as Shamid Basayev, who orchestrated some of the most horrific and bloody terrorist attacks in Russia. Participants in the conflict, Azerbaijani perspective. The Armenian army directly participated in the conflict, and fully sponsored separatist movements in Karabakh. This allowed Karabakh to withstand the Azerbaijani army, otherwise the conflict might not have occurred at all. The result of the war. The last full-scale conflict over Karabakh occurred in the 1990s, resulting in a victory for Azerbaijan. In 2020, a relatively large-scale conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia took place due to the long-standing struggle over Karabakh. As a result of the war, Azerbaijan lost approximately 20% of its territory. Due to the brutality of the Azerbaijani army, tens of thousands of Karabakh residents were forced to flee. Interestingly, during the war, the Azerbaijani government even prevented its own refugees from returning to Baku due to international agreements. On November 10, 2020, a joint statement was issued by the President of Azerbaijan, the Prime Minister of Armenia, and the President of Russia, declaring a complete cessation of all military operations in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict zone. The ceasefire agreement in Nagorno-Karabakh, signed by Armenia, Azerbaijan and Russia, including the deployment of Russian peacekeepers while Armenian armed forces were withdrawn, leaving a portion of Nagorno-Karabakh, including the city of Shusha, under Azerbaijani control. On the day of September 19, 2023, Baku initiated local anti-terrorism measures within the territory of Nagorno-Karabakh. In the morning of September 20th, the authorities of the unrecognized Nagorno-Karabakh Republic announced that an agreement had been reached for a complete ceasefire. In the event that Armenian aviation or artillery were to strike Azerbaijani positions unexpectedly, it could lead to a major conflict. Such an action would face significant international condemnation because Azerbaijan is legally operating within its internationally recognized territory, making it difficult to everyone to justify. The Republic of Nagorno-Karabakh has not been recognized by the global community and continues to be considered part of Azerbaijan. That's it for now, thank you for watching, don't forget to like and comment this video. See you.